Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jabate Hami and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says his country will do everything it can for peace in Afghanistan. Speaking alongside Afghan President Ashraf Ghani in Kabul, Khan said Pakistan and Afghanistan have historical ties. Ghani said Kabul values its relationship with Islamabad and promised to visit Pakistan soon. In occupied Kashmir, Indian troops have martyred 4 Kashmiris in a fake encounter in the Jammu district. Over 300 Kashmiris have been killed by occupation troops since India stripped the region of its autonomy in August last year. In September, the Indian military admitted wrongdoing in the killing of 3 local civilians earlier this year. In Pakistan, 2 soldiers have been martyred when terrorists opened fire on a checkpost in South Waziristan. The military's media cell says another soldier was wounded in the incident near Pash Zarat. It says an operation is underway to clear the area. The U.S. death toll from COVID-19 has exceeded the 250,000 mark. India has recorded more than 45,000 new cases of the coronavirus, with the tally approaching 9 million. The countrywide death toll has crossed 131,000 with 585 fatalities in the last 24 hours. Pakistan reported some 2,500 cases and 18 deaths overnight, pushing its toll to 7,248. Globally, the virus has claimed 1.3 million lives and infected more than 56 million. And in tennis, Russia's Daniil Medvedev beats Serbia's world number 1 Novak Djokovic in straight sets to reach the semi-finals of the ATP Finals. The Serb hit 24 unforced errors and 5 double faults in a loss to 4th seed Medvedev. Djokovic can still qualify for the last 4 if he wins his final round-robin match against Alexander Zverev on Friday. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says Islamabad will do everything it can for peace in Afghanistan. Speaking with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani in Kabul, Khan said the 2 countries have historical ties. Ghani also stressed that the people of Afghanistan want nothing but peace. He said Kabul values its relationship with Islamabad, as he promised to visit Pakistan soon. Earlier, upon arrival for his maiden visit, Khan was presented with a guard of honor at the Afghan presidential palace. He was received by acting Afghan Foreign Minister Mohammad Atmar and other senior government officials. Khan was accompanied by a high-level delegation, including Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and ISI Director General Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid. Australian elite troops are suspected of unlawfully killing 39 people in Afghanistan over 11 years. The country's military released a long-awaited report into alleged war crimes committed in the South Asian nation. The inquiry stated that 25 serving of former soldiers had carried out crimes or been accessories to them. Australian Defence Chief Angus Campbell said the report uncovers a shameful record of a warrior culture by some soldiers. Campbell noted that none of the alleged killings could be described as being in the heat of the battle. He said the army unreservedly apologized to the Afghan people. A special investigator will be appointed to determine whether there was sufficient evidence to prosecute. Pakistan's army says 2 soldiers embraced martyrdom as terrorists opened fire on a checkpost in South Waziristan. The army's media cell, ISPR, says another soldier was injured in the incident near Pash Zarat. It identified the deceased as Havaldar Matloob Alam and Sipoy Suleiman Shaukat. The Inter-Services Public Relations says security forces responded promptly. It adds an operation is underway to clear the area. U.S. charge d'affaires Angela Aguilar has hailed Pakistan's efforts for conflict prevention in the region. Meeting Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi, the diplomat acknowledged Pakistan's efforts for Afghan peace. Aguilar said the United States will continue efforts for common cause of peace in Afghanistan. In a statement, the military's media wing said matters related to regional security also came under discussion. In occupied Kashmir, Indian troops have martyred 4 Kashmiris in a fake encounter in the Jammu district. The youth were travelling from Jammu to Srinagar in a truck when occupation troops opened fire on them. Over 300 Kashmiris have been killed by occupation troops since India stripped the region of its autonomy in August last year. In September, the Indian military said its soldiers exceeded powers in the killing of 3 local civilians earlier this year. Israel has threatened to carry out more airstrikes in Syria if Iran continues its military presence in the country. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel will not allow any Iranian attempts to attack Tel Aviv from Syrian territory. Netanyahu's office issued a statement hours after a deadly Israeli airstrike in Syria. This coincided with the visit of the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Israel. Pompeo said Tehran's influence in the region is waning after the Abraham Accords. He said the Iranian regime will be ever more isolated until it decides to change its ways. The UK has announced its largest military spending boost in 30 years. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the extra $21.8 billion will be to upgrade military capabilities. In a statement, Johnson said the world order is more competitive than at any time since the Cold War. He stressed Britain must be true to its history and stand alongside allies. Johnson said he took the decision even during the pandemic because the defense of the realm must come first. He added the budget will be spent on pioneering new technology with plans for a new space command and artificial intelligence agency. The UK's current annual defense budget is over $55.4 billion. US President Donald Trump's election campaign has stepped up legal efforts to discredit the November 3rd presidential election. Over the past 24 hours, the campaign has asked a district judge to declare the results defective in Pennsylvania. The court filing said the state's Republican-controlled legislature should select the electors that will vote for president. The lawsuit also alleges inconsistent treatment by county election officials of mail-in ballots. The Trump campaign said it will file a petition for a recount in the Milwaukee and Dane counties of Wisconsin. It said Trump has paid about $3 million for recounts in the 2 counties. Meanwhile, pro-Trump demonstrations across the country have also picked up pace, with the largest rally so far in Atlanta, Georgia. 3 U.S. senators have announced plans to introduce legislation to hold the current government's proposed arms sale to the UAE. The sale includes F-16 and F-35 warplanes, over 14,000 bombs and drones worth $23 billion. 2 Democratic and a Republican senator issued a joint statement. It said the Trump administration bypassed the usual congressional review process for the sale. It added that the normalization deal between Israel and the UAE doesn't require the U.S. to fuel a dangerous arms race in the Middle East. The senators said the UAE's recent behavior indicates these weapons may be used to violate international law. China has slammed a U.S. report on how Washington should confront and contain Beijing. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says the report has been concocted by Cold War fossils. Lijian said the report exposes U.S. fear and unhealthy mentality about China's continuous development. Earlier, the U.S. State Department released a detailed report laying out a framework to contain China. The 74-page blueprint outlines steps the U.S. must undertake to address what it calls China's intent to revise the world order. The report recommended the US should retain the most powerful military and re-evaluate its alliances. Beijing has condemned Canada's accusations that China poses a cybersecurity threat. Earlier, Canada declared state-sponsored programs in China, Russia, Iran and North Korea as major cybercrime threats. In a press briefing, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Canada's accusations were groundless. The spokesperson said China was itself a victim of cyber attacks. Earlier, Canada's Communications Security Establishment Agency said foreign actors can attempt to disrupt the country's power supplies. It said although it is unlikely that hackers will intentionally cause major damage, but the threat of targeting critical Canadian organizations for intimidation cannot be ruled out. The US death toll from COVID-19 has exceeded the 250,000 mark. Authorities say the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine candidates can be ready for distribution within weeks. Globally, the virus has claimed 1.3 million lives and infected more than 56 million. More in this report.
Thousands of deaths and infections pile on as the world continues to grapple with the second wave of the novel coronavirus. In the US, the virus is now claiming at least one life every minute. Many states are further tightening restrictions in the last bit to contain the outbreak before the vaccine arrives. And Pfizer, Moderna and BioNTech seek to soon get emergency authorization for their drugs.
It's great news. I think it means a lot that there's an end in sight and that, that folks can remain disciplined in these kind of, whatever, just hopefully just this winter, and then by springtime we'll be back in business.
Over in Europe, Italy has reported 753 deaths overnight, its highest figure since the start of the second wave. Air France-KLM is preparing a test run to fly out dummy vaccine shipments in temperature-controlled conditions to the far-off regions. Meanwhile, the situation in Geneva remains tense with around 500 cases per day. Elsewhere, Russia's capital Moscow has turned the city's exhibition pavilion into a hospital as COVID-19 cases continue to rise.
Tomorrow will be a month since this hospital started to work. In the beginning, we admitted not so many patients and beds got occupied slowly. But now we admit quite a big number of patients almost every day. The numbers of cases are rising, so the hospital capacity and workload for medical workers are growing too. Patients come in great numbers now.
Japan's capital, Tokyo, has raised the alert level to the highest of the 4 stages after daily cases rose to a record high. In China, imported infections continue to emerge, while South Korea is striving desperately to cull new clusters. Meanwhile, India's death toll has risen to 585 to over 131,000, with the caseload approaching 9 million. Independent observers have disputed New Delhi's stance that the outbreak has slowed in India.
In Pakistan, 18 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 overnight, raising the death toll to 7,248. The Health Ministry says just above 2,500 tested positive in the last 24 hours. The ministry said there are more than 32,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of nearly 366,000 countrywide cases, more than 326,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 158,000 cases have been detected in the southern province of Sindh, while more than 112,000 in Punjab province. It added 1,535 patients across the country remain critical. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Mexico has welcomed the U.S. decision to drop criminal charges against its former defense minister Salvador Cienfuegos. Washington dropped the charges in favor of investigating Cienfuegos at home. In a news conference, Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard termed the U.S. decision unprecedented. He said the move showed U.S. authorities respect Mexican sovereignty and its military. The foreign minister added Cienfuegos will be prosecuted in Mexico only if agreed with a judge in the case. The former defense minister faced drug and money laundering charges in the US. Peru's new president, Francisco Sagasti, has announced his cabinet as the government seeks to tamp down angry protests. For a week, demonstrators have been demanding major reforms to the constitution. Sagasti appointed a legal expert, Violeta Bermudez, as the prime minister to head the 18-minister cabinet. The appointment of Sagasti after his conservative predecessor, Manuel Merino, resigned on Sunday has helped ease jittery markets. But the hundreds of people still marched on the streets of capital Lima, demanding constitutional reforms to curb corruption.
There is corruption in the government, in Congress, and in the municipalities. That is why we march. We are going to insist that this great mobilization that the youth started and which they have offered their lives for continues. And we municipal workers also demand a new constitution.
Japan has declared a climate emergency in a symbolic vote calling for action to combat global warming. Last month, the government committed to cut greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. Lawmakers said although the declaration is non-binding, it shows Japan's commitment to fighting global warming. With the vote, Japan has joined Britain, Canada, France and the EU in similar resolutions. Tokyo is also devising measures including investment funds and tax incentives to push through changes needed to reach the target. A young Afghan woman has opened an art gallery to create jobs, revive traditions and hope during a pandemic. More in this report.
In a small art gallery in Kabul, Marzia Panahi watches her employees apply paint to a framed felt canvas propped up against an easel. Panahi set up the Namad Gallery at the height of the coronavirus pandemic in September. She aimed to revive the use of felt in art to showcase her war-torn country's creativity and to try to create jobs for young people hit hard by the pandemic.
Our customers are mostly people who value domestic production, are art-loving and support the growth of Afghan culture because we do cultural work. We have been able to sell between 30 and 50 paintings recently in the past 1.5 to 2 months. And the prices of our paintings are between $100 to $200 US.
After being out of work for months due to COVID-19, Faika Sultani joined the venture. Painting has helped her overcome her depression during the lockdown period.
Generally, when I paint, it is a kind of expression of my feelings on canvas, paper, or felt that I enjoy. Painting on felt means that we can revive the old traditions and show people that we can use our Afghan resources and make our lives more beautiful.
Afghanistan, where more than 60% of the population is younger than 25, has always struggled with high youth unemployment, but the pandemic's economic impact has exacerbated problems.
In Greece, as Christmas bells start to ring this year, candle makers are leveraging the opportunity to their advantage. Candles shaped like Santa are adorned with surgical masks to raise awareness against COVID-19. More in this report.
Alexios Gerakis, a 37-year-old candle maker, owns a shop in the northern city of Thessaloniki. He churns out Santa-shaped candles during the Christmas season every year. But this time there's a twist and his candles are decorated with face masks.
Due to the times, we are also trying to convey a message that health comes first, then everything else. Christmas is a bit of a question mark for all of us this year, I think. We don't know how this will end up. We have to be optimistic, but it is uncertain what will happen.
Like many business owners, Gerakis is afraid he won't open in time for Christmas after Greece went into lockdown this month.
We are afraid we may not be able to open for the holidays. We don't know yet. We are waiting to see how things will develop. We have prepared to sell online, but it is not at all the same as having an open shop. In terms of visitors, you can't compare the two.
The Greek government is hoping to ease lockdown in December, but nothing is certain for now. The coronavirus pandemic has hit a fragile economy which was recovering from a debt crisis.
European stocks have declined over renewed fears of shutdowns due to rising coronavirus cases. The pan-European stock 600 slipped nearly 1%, with trade, oil and gas and travel stocks dropping. Frankfurt's DAX and London's FTSE slid close to 1% each. Italy's FTSE MIB declined well above 0.5%, while the CAC 40 in Paris shed almost 1% as well. Earlier Asian stocks traded mixed, with investors torn between optimism around a potential vaccine and economic worries. Chinese stocks, Seoul's Kospi and Australian bourses edged up, while Japanese stocks and Hong Kong index shed. In tennis, Russia's Daniil Medvedev beat Serbia's world number 1 Novak Djokovic in straight sets at the ATP Finals. The Serb hit 24 unforced errors and 5 double faults in a loss to 4-seed Medvedev. Djokovic got just one chance to break Medvedev's serve in the whole match, while the Russian converted 3 of the 8 break points. Djokovic can still qualify for the last 4 if he wins his final round-robin match against Germany's Alexander Zverev on Friday. Zverev earlier won 6-3, 4-6 and 6-3 against Argentina's Diogo Schwartzman. New Zealand and West Indies cricketers have tested negative for COVID-19 ahead of their T20 and Test match series. In a statement, New Zealand Cricket said they are all on schedule to leave their biosecure facility next week. Players and support staff from both the teams arrived in New Zealand last week after fulfilling their overseas commitments. They were placed into a mandatory 14-day isolation on arrival and were subject to 3 periodic COVID-19 tests. The players were allowed to leave isolation for training sessions after their first COVID-19 test on the 3rd day. The first match of the T20 series will be held in Auckland on the 27th of November, while a 2-test series will start on the 3rd of December. 3 South African players are in isolation ahead of their limited over series against England. In a statement, Cricket South Africa said 1 player tested positive for COVID-19, while the other 3 were in close contact with him. Names of the players have not been revealed. South Africa have not named any replacement for now, but 2 new players will join the group for the inter-squad practice matches. England will play 3 T20s and 3 one-day internationals from 27th of November. The English players were tested before departure and again when they arrived in Cape Town. Liverpool star striker Mohamed Salah has tested positive for coronavirus again while on international duty with Egypt. The 28-year-old initially tested positive last week despite not displaying any symptoms. He's likely to miss the Reds' next 2 games because of self-isolation rules. Liverpool host Leicester City in the Premier League on Sunday and then Atlanta in the Champions League group match on November the 25th. Salah will follow government and Premier League protocols on when he can return from Egypt. Salah has played all 8 of Liverpool's Premier League games this season, scoring 8 goals. Belgium beat Denmark 4-2 at the King Power Stadium to book their place in the Nations League finals. Romelu Lukaku maintained his superb form and scored a brace for Belgium. Yuri Tielemans opened the scoring for Belgium after just 3 minutes. Jonas Wind headed an equalizer, but Lukaku scored a second half brace to make the scoreline 3-1. A Nasser Charlie own goal reduced the deficit, but Kevin De Bruyne swept in a 4th to seal victory for Belgium. They join France, Spain and Italy in the finals, which will take place in October 2021. In another fixture, England thrashed Iceland 4-0 at the Wembley Stadium. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.